Hello, my name is Brittany Lee and Lui from FID Group 4. In my group, there is Phoebe Ng Chia En, Fu Li An, and Valerie Po Junyi. In our English 2 presentation, we're going to talk about rights. And our topic is there justice for women of color in the protection of women's rights? In this presentation, we're going to talk about discrimination in the injustices, violence, and positive changes in the community.
Thank you, Brittany, for the introduction. My name is Phoebe Ng. Now I'm going to talk about stereotypical problems about women of color in the protection of women's rights. Firstly, there should be justice for them. There are a few different types of historical stereotypes. For example, the Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire, Jim Crow, and more. The Mammy is a kind of stereotype where African American women work in a white family and nurse the family's children. It is a US stereotype, especially in the South. The Mammy figure is rooted in the history of slavery in the US. Black women were tasked with domestic and childcare work in white American family. The Mammy are always portrayed as older, overweight women with darker skin tone. The Mammy were also portrayed as a sassy woman. They are loyal to their slaver and their primary goal is to care for their needs. Next, the Jezebel stereotype. It is where African American women are labeled as sexual promiscuous and they are desperate for sex. This created an effect where they will not be seen as the victim if they were taken advantage of, which makes them more vulnerable to sexual predators. Next, the Sapphire stereotype. It is where African American women are portrayed to be rude and ill-mannered. As you can see in the illustration, it shows an immodest Sapphire beating and berating her husband. It is a 1910 postcard which shows that this is spread around that African Americans are rude. Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws were a collection of states and local states that legalized racial separation. During the Jim Crow period, African Americans would be beaten or jailed if they get into argument with the whites. In 1850, California statute provides that no blacks or Indians should be allowed to give evidence in favor of or even just against a white man. In this modern era, there are cases where black women are stereotyped as violent and they are materialistic. This can be referred to angry black women. As you can see in the illustration, the black women are stomping on her racket next to a pacifier. This creates an image where she is acting like a baby throwing a tantrum. This exchange between the referee and the other player also creates an portrayal where black women uses violence to achieve their goals. Next, I'm going to talk about how the awareness of stereotype affected black women. The idea of being target for group stereotypes can be upsetting and downgrading for black women. Black women in the US are more likely to suffer from physical or mental health problems compared to the other skin tone of women. Black women reported higher rate of diabetes and obesity. They experience lower cancer survival rates. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. Next, I'll pass to Leanne. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you, Phoebe, for passing me the baton. My name is Fu Li An, and I will be presenting about the violence against colored women. To further explain why there should be justice for women of color in the protections of women's rights is due to the violence pitted against them. Firstly, sexual violence against women of color. The sexual violence against colored women is often ignored due to the false prejudice regarding their skin color. However, this myth and other very real issues have influenced the number of Black women who report sexual assault. For every 15 Black women who are raped, only one reports her sexual assault. Next is domestic violence against women of color. Domestic violence against women of color is now more known as a serious mistreatment of human rights because it is rapidly growing. According to the research, the percentage of victimization in rape cases is 18.8% for African women, 34.1% for American Indian, and 17.7% for white women. Next is the prevention of violence in women of color. If there is justice against women of color, colored women can prevent violence by ending discrimination in legacy laws and ownership of advantages. Furthermore, they can also improve women's access to paid employment, to progress national projects, and policies to discuss violence against women. That's all for me, and I will be pass it to Brittany for the next point. Thank you.
Now we're going to talk about the violation of rights of women of color in the acting industry. In this slide, it says 1.4 out of 10. But what does 1.4 out of 10 actually mean? It means that 1.4 minorities out of 10 are chosen to play lead roles in films or shows. This is taken from the Hollywood Diversity Report in 2018. As you can see in this slide, there is a pie chart taken also from the UCLA's Hollywood Diversity Report 2018. This pie chart was based in the year 2016. And in this pie chart, you can see different cultures such as white, Black, Latino, Asian, people of other cultures, and Native people. As you can see, Native people hold the lowest percentage amongst the other races. And Native people are very underappreciated, and they're not recognized in the industry as much as the other cultures. As for Black people, they are more recognized and they're getting the recognition that they deserve along with Asian people. In this slide, it shows examples of female protagonists in popular action movies. Unfortunately, there has not been an action movie led by a woman of color, but in the past year, there has been an action film led by a man of color, which is a huge improvement from the older days. In this slide, it shows examples of discrimination in the acting industry. On the left, it says yellowface. Casting directors cast white actresses to play as Asian people. So they use makeup to make their eyes appear more slanted to look more Asian. This is very disrespectful and demeaning to Asian people. Whereas on the right, blackface, white actresses put makeup. They use makeup, like for example, they use foundation to put all over their face. So they use a very dark foundation to put all over their face, and they use lipstick, like a red lipstick, to make their lips more bigger, to look more like a Black person. This is very disrespectful too, and it just feeds into the stereotype. For the portrayal of women of color, in films or movies, Black women are represented to be ill-mannered, low-class, rude, fierce, and angry. As for Asian women, they're painted to be fierce in action movies, violent, ruthless. But however, for high school films, like the new age high school films, they're painted to be bubbly, to be nice, to be naive, and they're academically talented, they're so good at math, and they're so good at piano. There's always that stereotype in movies or shows. Lastly, for Hispanic and Latino women, they're always they always make them feisty and fierce, just like Black women. Like, they're loud, they have this feisty personality, and they like to talk back, and they're tough. They like to paint them up to be tough, feisty, and ill-mannered. This stereotype pushed into the shows and movies really makes young women think that they're like that. That's how they are in real life. But the truth is they're not. It's just a stereotype. It's what people paint them up to be in movies and shows.
Apart from what Brittany have presented, there should be justice in the protection of women's rights because of the injustice discrimination against women of color, especially in terms of beauty standard. So guys can see from the slides, women with darker complexions smaller than women with fair and light complexions. This is because women with darker complexions, they always get frowned upon by the public for having curly hair, darker skin tone, and people always say that they're dirty and things like that. While women with fair skin tone, they are always being worshipped. People like them, people always compliment their figure, their physical look are perfect just because they have fair skin tone. So due to this subtle discrimination that some of the women of color has faced, some of the women actually risk their life to try whitening injection procedure, which is really famous across the Asian country, especially in Korea, because when people, especially they wanted to do a plastic surgery and some of the beauty procedure, they will always travel to Korea because they actually do have a lot of professionals there. So according to Leading Edge Health, 70% of African women and 75% of Nigerian women have actually used or tried the procedure of whitening injection. In addition, there's also discrimination that happen often in workplaces, as you guys can see from the slides. And because of this discrimination, it actually made the unemployment rates to drop at 5.2% in July 2019 and continuously at 4.4% in August 2019, according to Caitlin Mullen. Because colored women, they always get stereotyped for having to suit labor jobs just because they have darker skin tone or they have different skin tone. People will always think that, oh, colored women, they suit labor jobs. As you can see that in China, most of the women there, they actually do a lot of those factory work. So they actually people or company from America, for example, they will actually ask China, the factory in China, to make the products, to do the products at the China factory, just because China are very famous with those factory produced product. So that is why many of the companies, they do have the mindset and the stereotype of Asian women and some of the other colored women. So other than that, it is also probably due to some company having the mindset that women of color are being less presentable and unskilled. No matter how much you show them how qualified you are by showing your qualification and certificate, some of the company actually choose not to pick you just because of your skin color, and they rather have a person that have the same ethnicity and same skin color to work in the same company just because they do not want to feel ashamed, you know, world nowadays. So that is why some of the company do not want to hire women of color, and which cause the unemployment rates to increase. So in addition to that, there is also racial discrimination in general healthcare, as you guys can see here, whereby people of color, especially women, receive unfair treatment. For example, in the United States, you guys can see here, Black and Latina women are more likely to experience a discrimination. This reason being their status and ethnicity. No matter how white you are, sometimes if they know that you are from Mexico, for example, they just wanted to treat you badly because of the propaganda and because of the leader back in America. This, for example, just because they know that you are from somewhere, you have this ethnicity, they just do not want to treat you fairly like how the people do. And sometimes they will look at your status because white women actually, they always have this mindset saying that, okay, all black people, no matter men or women, they are just low in status just because they're immigrant and they are minority in America. So that what makes some of the white people to have such mindset like that. Lastly, this heavily proves that there should be justice for women of color in the protection of women's rights because of their discrimination they face in terms of beauty standards, job employment, and general healthcare. Thank you, and I'll pass the next baton to Leanne.
Hello, it's me again. I'm Leanne. Thank you, Valerie, for passing me the baton. And I will be presenting about the positive changes of justice for women of color across the society. Firstly, the positive changes and advancement at work of colored women. There is an advancement for colored women, which is a federal law, is the Equal Pay Act of 1963 that can require companies to pay the same amount for women. Women of color who are working, they used to face some challenges because of their race, gender, and also culture. Nowadays, colored women are offered with greater visibility at work and international experiences, which are important in reaching higher achievement. Secondly, the positive changes of colored women in education. There is also advancement in education, such as consenting movement and access to education. It shows some notable numbers of Black women to advance and often held up as proof of their movement toward equality. Thirdly is the advancing equity for women of color. The Advancing Equity for Women of Color, which is the Affordable Care Act, as known as ACA, this law has a big potential to straighten the disproportionately poor health of women of color through better access to affordable health insurance and also health services. Thank you, and I will pass it to Phoebe for the conclusion. Thank you.
Alright, now we have came to the end of the presentation. The goal of this presentation is to raise awareness of the rights of women of color in the protection of women's rights. The violence against women of color, the infringement against the rights of women of color in the acting industry, the disparity of sexism against women of color, and the positive change in justice for women of color through society. There is evidence from the content that there is advancement in the protection of women's rights. However, they are treated unfairly just because of their skin color and gender. This is agreed that action should be taken to protect the rights of women of color. We all can do it. Thank you for listening.